Nearly all government-financed housing projects in the United States began with the same dream, providing affordable, safe housing for low-income families. It is well known that certain housing projects are more dangerous than others. These housing projects are often located in low-income, high-crime areas and can present various challenges to residents and law enforcement. The term dangerous encompasses a wide range of factors, including crime rates, poverty levels, and overall community well-being. In addition to the reputation some of these housing projects have for being dangerous, it is important to consider the underlying economic and social factors that contribute to the conditions that make them so dangerous. For decades, American government's efforts to house the poor have relied on the construction of subsidized housing plots, more commonly known as projects. In the past, city planners used the term project to refer to the improvements these developments would provide. Today, the term is mostly associated with inner-city blight and crime. As a result of concentrated poverty and misguided public policy, these projects have become a key part of urban legend, news reports, and rap lyrics. Brewster Douglas Housing Projects. Detroit, Michigan. One of the largest residential housing projects owned by the city of Detroit was the Brewster Douglas Housing Projects. They were the first federally funded housing projects for African Americans. Brewster Douglas were located on the city's Near East Side in neighborhoods known as Paradise Valley and Black Bottom, and were a symbol of crime and blight. There were hundreds upon hundreds of Detroiters living there before they became infamous symbols of decay. As the first public housing project for African Americans, they were home to Motown legends Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, Florence Ballard, and Smokey Robinson. Beginning in the 1940s, the Brewster Project was expanded. A 6-story apartment building was built in 1942, followed by row homes and 14-story towers dubbed Frederick Douglass Homes in 1951. Several thousand Detroiters lived in the area at its peak, when it became known as the Brewster Douglas area.
Sources say they confessed to the robbery and murder of a French street artist who was visiting Detroit. But today the court hearing was put on hold. Action News reporter Kimberly Craig was in court today. Kim, what was the reason for the holdup?
Well, they want actually a competency examination for all of the 3 adults. We understand the relatives of the victim will fly in from France for some of the future court dates. But today, there were relatives of the defendants filling the courtroom here in Frank Murphy. Question now is, were the 3 men competent when they sat down to talk to police? This is our first look in a courtroom of the 3 young men accused in the beating, robbery, and killing of Bilal Bareni. The 23-year-old street artist from France was visiting Detroit last year when he was murdered outside the abandoned Brewster Projects. Police say Bilal was skateboarding on the basketball court when the 3 young men and a then 13-year-old boy, all reported members of a gang, allegedly launched their attack on Bilal. The youngest defendant, who is now 14 and being prosecuted in juvenile court, reportedly told police that they were out murking, a street term meaning they'd set out to randomly murder someone. Sources say Deontay Travis is the one who allegedly pulled the trigger, though he claimed it was an accident. For the 3 men requested that each of their clients be sent for a competency evaluation to see if they have the intellectual capacity to even waive their Miranda rights, which includes the right to remain silent. 18-year-old Jason Curtis and 20-year-old Draquan Rich will also be evaluated to see if they are competent to stand trial, all 3 facing charges that include felony murder and robbery. And the competency hearing for the three men is set for October 9th. Their 14-year-old alleged accomplice, who will have a pretrial hearing in about 2 weeks, reportedly told police that he used his cut of the money that they stole from Bilal to buy some junk food and weed.
As a last resort, Brewster Douglas was subjected to urban renewal efforts in the early 1990s, which resulted in the demolition of the original Brewster homes and the replacement of 250 townhouses. 2 of the 6 towers were imploded in 2003 in order to consolidate residents and cut costs. Demolition began on September 4, 2013, and the site was completely cleared by late 2014. B.W. Cooper Apartments, aka Calliope Projects, New Orleans, Louisiana. Built between 1939 and 1941, the Calliope Projects / B.W. Cooper was a neighborhood in New Orleans and one of the housing projects of the city. This project gained nationwide notoriety for its extremely high violent crime rate. It was officially called the B.W. Cooper Apartments and was located in Central City, New Orleans. The project consisted of 1,546 units spread across 56 acres of land, equivalent to 24 city blocks. A trio of musical brothers from the Calliope, Percy, Corey, and Vashon Miller, became known as Master P, C Murder, and Silk the Shocker in the 1990s, rapping about the harsh realities of life in and around the projects. When Master P achieved success with Bout It, Bout It, he collected checks for the records he released on his own label, No Limit. In 1998, No Limit was the biggest independent label in America, and kids across the country rapped along with tales of the Calliope. The No Limit label sold 50 million records in 2001, and Master P established an influential business model for artists. Even when C Murder hit it big, he kept an apartment in the Calliope and renovated it.
A G, a gangster. Street talk for a tough guy, has died. Randall Watts was a suspected murderer and drug dealer, gunned down in a drive-by shooting. His friends take him into his hangout, Rose Tavern, for one last round. They chant the hard question. Is there heaven for a gangsta? It's a lyric from a rap song. The rapper, Master P. He's a friend of Randall Watts. They're from the same neighborhood.
I done seen people get held up at gunpoint. You know, I done ran for my life trying to dodge a drive-by. You gotta be from there to understand that.
Police say it's getting better. But this is still one of the most violent places in one of the most violent cities in the country. Calliope Projects, 3rd Ward. Born Percy Miller, Master P is back in the hood with his record label crew.
Man, what's going on with you? What's going on with you?
Everyone at Calliope knows him. 7 years ago, he was the guy selling CDs out of his car.
I'm just talking about what I see. I mean, look around. Look, what you see. You tell me what you see. You see a bunch of mansions around here? Do you?
No.
Okay, well, that's reality. That's what I'm talking about. It don't even get no realer than this, you know? But I bet you one thing, every person back here probably own a gun. So that's what we talk about.
And that's real.
That's real.
The decline began in the early 1980s. Rival street cliques opened up shops around this time and plagued the housing project's future. According to local law enforcement, these dark days were marked by retaliatory violence that lasted for days. The NOPD reported that violence escalated in 1987 after Sam Scully Clay was hit in the Calliope. Two notorious Calliope bosses, Glenn Metz and Meatball, controlled New Orleans for years. There were over 1,000 kilograms of coke moved through New Orleans by them, which resulted in a lot of people dying. From 1993 to 2004, 88 people died in the Calliope. New Orleans received the nickname Murder Capital as a result of the violence and drug trade coming from uptown. The Calliope Project had the bloodiest reputation in 1994 in the United States. The Calliope was demolished after Katrina. In 2007, a small section was reopened, but was quickly demolished in 2014. The Marrero Commons was erected in its place with 175 units, and the Calliope became a memory. John DeShields Homes, East St. Louis, Illinois. Compared to all other communities, from the smallest towns to the biggest cities, East St. Louis has one of the highest crime rates in America, with a crime rate of 38 per 1,000 residents. There is a 1 in 26 chance of becoming a victim of either violence or property crime in the city of East St. Louis. Based on 19 years of data on homicides in East St. Louis, researchers found that 82 murders occurred within a block of a public housing complex from 2000 to 2018. There have been 453 murders within the 14-mile border of East St. Louis, Illinois, between 2000 to 2018. Police have only been able to solve 25% of homicide cases. A total of 46 men and 8 women were killed in the public housing projects. More than half of the women killed were involved in domestic disputes before they died.
And Illinois State Police are working together to find the person who pulled the trigger and ended a 17-year-old boy's life.
Fox 2's Blair Leday joining us live from East St. Louis tonight and telling us we now know the identity of that teenager. Blair.
That's right. A St. Clair County coroner identified him as Christopher Emerson. Now, people living in that area where he was found gunned down this morning, they say they're not surprised to hear this news. They're just saddened. East St. Louis police say they got a call about a shooting at around 9:20 Friday morning.
And it's frustrating, and I hate to see it. I hate it.
It happened in this area at the John DeShields housing projects on McCaslin Avenue. Police found who St. Clair County coroner confirmed was Christopher Emerson. He was suffering from a gunshot wound.
They ride by, drive by, and shooting up at people's houses and run up to people's cars, just shooting at random and for no reason. I mean, what's the problem?
Police say Emerson died at the scene. The tragedy playing out as kids and young children filled the streets headed for school.
It's a lot. It's a lot. This is where children grow up at. So when you hear about that, it breaks my heart, and I'm sure it breaks all these guys' heart because they have children.
East St. Louis police asked Illinois State Police to assist them in the investigation. As authorities search for leads, people in the complex search for a sense of peace.
Now, this is my little boy, and I'm raising him, and I think about that every time he come out or he hanging out. I'm thinking it could be my son.
I got a 19-year-old, and I fear for him every day because a 17-year-old just got killed this morning.
Now, authorities say if you have any information that could help them solve this crime, you can call East St. Louis Police, Illinois State Police, or you can call Crime Stoppers to leave an anonymous tip. We're now live in East St. Louis. I'm Blair Leday, Fox 2 News.
East St. Louis Housing Authority has 12 officers plus Police Chief Cortez Slack, but they can only charge someone with trespassing or disturbing the peace. It has been reported that there are new security cameras installed at the John DeShields homes on McCaslin Avenue, but no one is monitoring them actively, and no law enforcement agency has requested surveillance video. In East St. Louis, John DeShields homes had the most murders. A review of the records showed there were 17 murders at John DeShields during the 19-year span. Cabrini Green Projects, Chicago, Illinois. Originally known as Little Hells since the late 1860s, these projects were built on cursed ground. Due to its status as Chicago's first slum, first gangster neighborhood, and first all-around hellhole, this name was fitting. On these grounds and in the neighboring Goose Island area, gang banging, drug dealing, vice, illegal gambling, and excessive murder began. It was originally known as the Francis Cabrini Row Houses after the first American citizen canonized by the Roman Catholic Church, and bordered Evergreen Avenue on Chicago's near North Side. Approximately 15,000 people lived in Cabrini Green at its peak, which had 3,607 units on the north, Orland Street on the east, Chicago Avenue on the south, and Halsted Street on the west. The complex was also the setting for the horror film Candyman from 1992, in addition to the very real violence in the complex. The director said that he chose the location for the film because it was a place of such palpable fear. Notable gangs include Mickey Cobras, Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords, Imperial Chaplains, 14th Street Clovers, and Black Disciples.
Gangs are trying to end the violence in one Chicago community. Elizabeth Brackett reports.
Cabrini Green, notorious for being one of the most dangerous housing projects in the country. Last October, the shooting death of 7-year-old Dontrell Davis as he walked the 100 yards from his building to his school hand in hand with his mother, epitomized the violence Chicago Housing Authority residents faced every day. Schoolmates of Dontrell Davis, like 10-year-old Senku Selvi, were terrified walking to school.
That made me scared because, I gotta, walk down the long way instead of walking the short way, because you never know, if somebody can shoot you with a bullet, and a bullet don't got no eye.
But today, things are different at Cabrini Green, very different. Since Dontrell Davis's death, there have been no gang-related murders in Cabrini Green. There have not even been reports of gang-related gunfire. In the first 6 months of this year, police reports show crime down 24% over last year.
Now, God, it is clear to everybody that when we said that we wanted unity and peace, brothers and sisters on this north side wasn't faking.
Community leaders like Marion Stamp say much of the credit for the drop in crime should go to gang leaders who negotiated a peace treaty last October. Stamp's group, the Tranquility Marksman Memorial Organization, threw a party for leaders who 9 months ago would never have been found in the same room.
The fact that we resolve our differences at the table, or we resolve our differences in communicating with each other, and not resolving these differences with a gun is why we're here today.
After the speeches came awards. Longtime rivals followed each other up to the stage.
To Frederick Watson, thank you for the role that you played in maintaining the peace in the hood, brother.
Thank you very much. Hold on. On behalf of the Traveling Vice Lord Nation, I'd just like to say, you know what I'm saying, we're going to stick with the peace, you know what I'm saying, 110%, no violence. Stop the peace, brothers.
Fred Watkins grew up in Cabrini, went to junior college for 2 years on a basketball scholarship, then returned. Now he is an outreach worker for Stamp's Tranquility Marksman organization in Cabrini. He is effective because he is also the leader or chief of the Traveling Vice Lords, a citywide gang with Cabrini members.
Before the peace on a Saturday night, or what did it sound like down here?
Wild, Wild West. Friday and Saturday night, Wild Wild West. But see, they have no certain days here. Before the peace, there wasn't no certain day to shoot. Shoot when you get ready. You know, you can shoot on a Sunday. When church getting out, it have happened.
And what was all the shooting about? I mean, who was shooting who?
Opposition shooting oppositions. This organization shooting at this one shooting at this one, you know. It's all about respect, you know. You come in my turf, you gonna get hurt. Don't walk in my turf without asking me.
Before, how comfortable would you have felt standing on this corner?
Not real good.
Would you have done it?
No. No. 'Cause I love my life.
And you really think if you just come down here in the middle of a sunny afternoon and stood around, you probably would have gotten shot?
Yeah. Before the truth, yeah. Shot or shot at, because, you know, I watch all angles.
So you learned how to duck.
And then, you know, I'm 6'5", I'm a tall target.
Were you always carrying a gun with you?
Oh, yeah. Big gun. Oh, yeah. Because, you know, back then, you know, it was either kill or be killed. So, you know, don't get me wrong, I love my life. And then, you know, I don't like taking other people's lives, but if you know we're in situations, if they're trying to take your life, so what should I do? Protect myself and protect myself the best way I could.
During the 1980s and 1990s, Cabrini Green experienced its roughest times as gang wars erupted over control of heroin and crack cocaine. In addition to controlling elevators, gang members often charged residents for use, even if the gang members did not live there. The elevators were also the site of rapes, where young women were brutally raped in the elevators and darkened hallways, but life had to go on for these women in the projects since law enforcement did not care to help them. In fact, law enforcement stayed as far away from these projects as possible. A blockade of the streets near the buildings by police gave gang members the courage to walk around with AK-47s, Tech-9s, and pistols at night as they fired them off for fun. This would actually take place on a regular basis. Demolition of Cabrini Green began in the late 1990s, and the last high-rise portions were demolished in 2011. Lewis Heaton Pink Houses, Brooklyn, New York. The Lewis Heaton Pink Houses, better known as the Pink Houses or simply the Pinks, were constructed in 1959 and contain 1,500 apartments in 22 eight-story buildings. Residents described the complex as a hellhole. As a result of violence and the constant presence of illegal weapons, unlit stairwells are particularly dangerous areas, leaving both residents and police at constant risk. There is more than just poor lighting at the Pink Houses. Trash accumulates in front of the building faster than it can be disposed of, and the smell is unbearable. In 2005, the gang known as the Pink Houses crew built quite a savage reputation for themselves by robbing jewelry stores and dropping badly battered bodies along the expressway.
Yesterday night, tragedy struck outside of the Pink Houses in East New York as a woman was killed when she was struck by a car. News 12's Caitlin Ulrich met with someone who says they knew the victim. She says they'll miss her free spirit.
It's a spirit. You know, I hate to say was because I'm still in disbelief that she's even gone. I just don't see how somebody could be so harsh to do something like that.
It was around 7:30 last night when police say 24-year-old Shakira Serrano was hit by a vehicle. Sharoya lives in the neighborhood and says that Serrano was her baby sister.
Family's not always biological.
It was here at the LH Pink Houses where police say Serrano was hit, and it was an incident involving Serrano, a man, and another woman. After being hit by that car, Serrano suffered severe injuries to the head.
Just woke up to a lot of banging on my door saying what happened. And when I came downstairs, I just saw, you know, her lifeless body on the floor. And somebody was giving her CPR and pumping life, you know, trying to pump life back into her. but I didn't get close to it. I just, stood from a distance, and I went back upstairs and just prayed for her.
She was brought to the hospital, and there she was pronounced dead. And Shoroya says that she is going to be keeping Serrano alive through all of her memories.
Because she's just a free, live spirit, She comes and she makes her presence known, And she, in her heart and her spirit, she's the baddest thing walking. I love her for that.
Police are investigating this incident as a homicide and have not said if they have made any arrests yet. In East New York, for News 12, I'm Caitlin Ulrich.
There are frequent gunshots in the Pinks at night, and many residents do not dare to leave their homes in the evenings. They also fear those who are supposed to protect and serve them. A 28-year-old unarmed resident of the Pink houses was shot dead by an NYPD officer in a dark stairwell in 2014. In February 2016, Gurley was found guilty of manslaughter after the officer argued with his partner over who should report the shooting to supervisors. The officer who shot Gurley spent nearly 20 minutes arguing with his partner. Pruitt-igoe, St. Louis, Missouri. There were 33 11-story buildings that shadowed the city below the Pruitt-igoe housing complex, built in 1954 during racial tensions throughout the United States. As the apartments were originally built for middle-class families, they quickly turned into crumbling properties that housed only the poor African-American residents of the city. St. Louis was experiencing rapid population decline during the late 1940s. Middle-class residents moved out and poor residents took over their homes, resulting in slums growing up everywhere. To combat this, the government erected high-rise homes that would house 15,000 residents and eradicate low-lying slums. In St. Louis, the towers were called Poor Man's Penthouse. Instead of eliminating ghettos, they became the city's newest slums. As soon as the Pruitt-igoe towers were built, they began to look like almost empty holes a decade later.
Is gradually being overcome with the aid of a massive outpouring of material, money, and manpower. Housing officials and residents began the job of correcting the major problems. 30 additional carpenters were added to the maintenance crews to board up an estimated 10,000 broken windows, which contributed to the general breakdown of services when temperatures dropped below zero last week. 5 additional plumbers joined the crews working to repair water pipes. Clothing and other household items needed to replace those that were underwater, and ice in the apartments continued to flow into the community center. The center, being used as a headquarters for the massive cleanup, doubled as a meeting place this morning for the Pruitt-igoe Coordinating Council.
Now, there are a lot of other groups that want to come in and do something, but we need you to tell us what is most important and what takes priority. I would like to recommend the following. That you need, first of all, to have this area declared as a disaster area and an emergency area. That the second thing, that you work on evacuation, not trying to clean up what's here, but evacuation of the citizens who are here and who cannot make it in the condition that these homes are in today. And the third thing is to work for a permanent solution to this problem which keeps coming up time and time and time again.
Due to accidents caused by architectural defects as well as ongoing crime and vandalism, occupancy dropped dramatically. Rat infestations and faulty electrical wiring made the buildings ripe for muggings. The elevators skipped several floors so that riding time would be minimized, so the floors in between became prime targets for muggings. People urinated in the stairwells and elevators, clothes were stolen from laundry rooms, fighting broke out, trash was thrown out of windows, and women were afraid to move around the buildings alone. By the 1970s, the government decided that the housing project was a failure and began to demolish the buildings on live television.
The notorious Pruitt-Igoe project is now 1/3 down. The rest of it should be leveled by the end of this year. We talked about the project, the final demolition stage, with Tom Costello, head of the St. Louis Housing Authority.
The contractor is moving ahead with the complete demolition of the entire project.
I assume he's also got to remove all this debris, a lot of it.
That's right. That's part of the contract, and he has to have the ground completely leveled in a park-like area.
So when you get a park-like area, what are you going to do with it? Make a park?
I don't know. That's a good question, and it hasn't been resolved yet. I would hope that there'd be a lot of discussion on this at the community level, is what is the best use of this land. It'll be 57 acres. It's in a fairly good location, I would think, and perhaps if we use our heads, we could develop it for better use than we did in the past.
No longer will sociologists be able to come through St. Louis and say there's the worst housing project in the nation, right?
That's right, and yet that's a positive thing. I think for once and for all, we ought to get rid of it. It's been an eyesore and a cancer to the city, and I think in that respect, it's positive that we are getting rid of the problem.
Tom, you studied it and thought about it a long time. Just briefly, what went wrong? Why didn't it work?
Chris, that's always tough to make it oversimplified. The easiest answer I can come up with is housing by itself and of itself does not solve all the social problems of our community, and I think that's the one lesson I've learned out of this.
Robert Taylor Homes, Chicago, Illinois. Robert Taylor Homes opened in 1962 with 16 high-rises and 27,000 residents, of whom over 70% were children. A few years after the homes opened, the situation quickly deteriorated. According to the Chicago Housing Authority, CHA, portions of the project were the worst slums in the country. A particularly awful section of the complex, known as the Hole, was controlled by the Mickey Cobras, which frequently engaged in turf wars with rivals, the Gangster Disciples. It has been reported that Mickey Cobras recruit children as young as 12 years old. As a public housing development on the south side of Chicago, the Robert Taylor Homes were once the largest in the nation. A total of 4,415 units were built in these 24 16-story high-rises, named after Robert Taylor, the first black student to enroll at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1888.
Renault Robinson, a young South Side cop. He knows Robert Taylor Homes like nobody's business. But he has a vision. He knows what Robert Taylor Homes are, or what they can be for those who live in them.
Okay, I have a feeling that we can reform this housing to the extent that we can make people whole again and give them a lease on life that they don't have now, which is something that's very important. If we give these people health care, perfect schools, all of the city services that they're supposed to receive, decent housing, good elevators, you know, the whole bit, what you end up with is less people who are plagued with problems and less problems on the government.
We hear a lot about crime in the area.
There's absolutely an incredible amount of crime in this area. And the reason that the crime is so great is because there is, on the part of the authorities, the police and other city agencies, there's no real focus on prevention. None. You know, if in the Loop, downtown, in other areas, there's a focus on prevention, right? There are police officers on the corner, there are policemen walking the street, there are policemen stationed in places. Have you seen one policeman over here?
It was also plagued by poor infrastructure and inadequate maintenance. Elevators kept failing, forcing people to exit between floors. Accidents were common. Firemen were unable to reach the 14th floor in time to save 3 children because of a broken elevator in one incident. During the 1990s, Chicago's crime rate was at a high, but the Robert Taylor homes were like a hellish world of criminal activity all to themselves. More than 10% of people living in the Taylor projects in 1993 were victims of violent crimes like sexual assault, murder, shooting, or robbery. The Robert Taylor homes were among the poorest houses in the country during their time. It was reported in 1999 that 95% of the 20,000 residents of the housing development were unemployed and relied solely on public assistance. In Chicago, there is a high rate of violent crime and gang activity in the Robert Taylor homes because of its poverty. More than half of the former residents of the Robert Taylor homes were still waiting for replacement housing promised by the CHA despite demolition of the homes beginning in 2002.
Out of her van or her station wagon. You know what I'm saying? This is my little soldier right here. His name Randy. He's my first officer. Come here, Randy. Front and center, soldier. This is my soldier. We started a little organization over here called BOI. B-O-I. It's called Boys of Islam. You know, just for an example, you know, I'm teaching them knowledge of self, knowledge of others, and knowledge of, get your little gang-banging ass on, and knowledge of other people. All right? Now, who's the original man?
The original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, the cream of the planet Earth, God of the universe.
So he know what, that's just a little example of what I'm doing over here in the Robert Taylor. You know what I'm saying? All right, come on this way.
In the United States, government-funded housing projects began with a common dream to eliminate urban slums and offer low to middle-income families affordable, safe housing options. Many residents of some of the nation's most infamous housing projects have called for their demolition, suggesting that this dream has fallen so far. Large-scale government housing has experienced some very dark days, from gang violence to drug traffic to incompetence in local housing authority offices. The most vulnerable residents of the projects, the young and the very old, suffer the most. It is them who suffer from the crossfire of racially segregated, poverty-stricken, structurally flawed buildings. Those are the ones who are truly missed by the system.